Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you might be. Thank you for joining me today. My name is John Laffey. I am the ISO 27001 Program Manager here at Perry Johnson Registrars. And in today's presentation, we are going to be talking about the transition to the 2022 version of ISO 27001, which actually has a deadline coming up soon. A few notes before we get started. Everyone has been muted for call clarity. The slides from this presentation will be available from our website at pjr.com. Under training, there's a link to past webinar slides. Those should be up shortly after today's broadcast. And additionally, a recording of this webinar, as well as all of our other past webinars, are available for watching on YouTube. You can just search for Perry Johnson Registrars, and they're all available to you for free. And also, if you do have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to type them up in the questions box. And at the conclusion of the presentation, I will be happy to answer them all. So with that being said, we'll go ahead and get into it. I'm going to turn my camera off so you don't have to stare at me talking the whole time, but I just wanted everybody to be able to see my face before we got started. So here we go. So what we're going to be looking at in today's webinar is obviously, when is the deadline? What is the impact? And then additionally, we're going to be talking about some of the changes between the 2013 version of the standard and the 2022 version of the standard. So let's take a look. So the deadline for the transition to the 2022 version of the standard is October 31st of this year, 2025. But a note to anyone who is currently certified to the 2013 version, you should expect that you're going to need to transition ahead of that date, and we'll get into some of those reasons why here. So as I mentioned, if you're currently certified, after October 31st, those certificates will no longer be valid. Now, the reason you should plan on transitioning ahead of time is, a number of things need to happen before that new cert can actually get issued. The audit obviously needs to be conducted. If there's nonconformities, corrective action responses need to be submitted and accepted. If there's major nonconformities, there might be a revisit that's needed to confirm that those have been closed out. And then obviously a package review by an executive committee needs to be done, and a certificate has to be issued at the end of all that. So, that can take several weeks, even longer, depending on, if there are nonconformities, how long corrective action responses take to come in. So that's why you certainly want to be thinking about going through that transition audit, as soon as possible, to make sure that you don't come close to hitting that drop dead date of October 31st and having a lapse cert. Here at Perry Johnson, we have come up with a deadline of July 31st of this year. Again, for all those reasons I just stated, to make sure that none of our clients come close to the deadline of October 31st. And if you're looking at doing your initial 27001 certification, obviously you want to be looking at the 2022 version and not the 2013 version. I don't think at this point there'd be any certification bodies. I know we certainly wouldn't, that could even issue a certificate to 2013, but definitely make sure you're looking at the most recent version, which is 2022. Now, just to get into some of the changes between the 2013 and the 2022 versions of the standard. So the numbered clauses, these are the requirements in sections 4 through 10. So those would be those requirements that aren't controls in Annex A. All of these are, in my opinion, quite minor, but I still thought we'd go over them quickly, just so if anyone's interested, you can have a little insight. The first one talks about determining requirements of interested parties, which was a requirement in the previous version as well. But now it adds that you have to determine which of those requirements will be addressed through the ISMS. So interested parties, right? Customers, leadership, regulatory bodies, all sorts of different groups of people could be considered interested parties. They may have a lot of requirements. Not all of those will relate to information security. So I think the intent of this change was to identify if a customer, has specific information security related requirements, that those are being identified as something that you're going to address through the implementation of your ISMS. Another change talked about objectives, and again, objectives were obviously part of the previous version. Requirements around them are all very similar. The change is that it says that objectives shall be monitored and available as documented information. So the last version didn't explicitly say that you needed to monitor them, although it did say that you needed to update them. And obviously there's some other requirements around management review in terms of reviewing if objectives are being met and the performance of your ISMS. But this change is basically saying there needs to be evidence now that these objectives that are measurable are being monitored, so that ideally, if you weren't meeting them, you could make changes or take action to try and change that. Another minor change, which I think is interesting, but it's basically, it says that any changes to the ISMS shall be carried out in a planned manner. So my understanding of this change is that they just want to see that changes are made carefully and thought out ahead of time. And it's not just an individual deciding, they're going to change a policy or change the scope of the system and bring new people in, exclude people, change controls that are implemented or applicable to the organization. And I give some examples here of ways that an organization could demonstrate that, which if you have a risk assessment you've completed, ahead of a change, any type of records related to planning or project management, amongst others. But those are just some examples of things that you could show an auditor to demonstrate that changes are being made in a planned manner. The more interesting changes, I think, are to Annex A themselves, or itself. First and foremost, there used to be 14 categories of controls in the 2013 version, which as an auditor was nice because it kind of helped the audit planning aspect of planning these audits. But now they've collapsed those into 4 categories, which are organizational, people, physical, and technological. As we'll see in the next slide, for the most part, the controls, if not the exact same, are very similar. Some controls have been combined from several, or 2 to 1. Some have been dropped, and there have been 11 new controls that have been added. So I wanted to briefly touch on those to hopefully help you understand their intent and maybe give some insight on ways that you can demonstrate that you have implemented those effectively. The first new control is threat intelligence. So really what this control is looking for is that you're using different tools or communications available to try and stay up to date on new and emerging threats. There's a ton of different sources of this type of information. You can subscribe to a number of these different groups and get emails, sometimes daily, that will give you a list of all the new threats that have been discovered and reported. And obviously, not all of these are going to apply to you and your organization, but as an auditor, we're really looking to see that someone's looking at these things, saying, hey, do we have these systems, SOS, whatever the case may be, is this something that we use in our organization? Is there a potential that this vulnerability could pose a risk to us? And if so, obviously taking action. The next control is specifically for cloud services. It wants to see that there's processes in place. As I typed out here, the acquisition, use, management, and exit from cloud services. So practically, what we'll be looking for, or I'll be looking for as an auditor, is there a policy of some type that talks about cloud services specifically? It doesn't have to be a separate policy. It could be, you know, if you have an existing supplier relationships policy, it could be added there. It could be standalone. Really not concerned with where it is, but just that it exists. So is there a policy that talks about, you know, what needs to be done in terms of using cloud services? Another example might be, you know, can you demonstrate that your organization understands the shared information security responsibilities? So what's the provider doing, and then what do you need to be doing? Is there evidence that the agreements or terms and conditions that you have with the cloud provider have been reviewed and they're meeting your organization's information security requirements? Has a risk assessment been done, right, where you look at what potential risks does this cloud provider and the services you'll utilize from them potentially bring? And then another part of this, which is typically something that's already being done for any supplier that could impact your information security, but is there some level of due diligence that's being performed with the provider ahead of time to have some assurance that they are operating in a way that meets your information security requirements? The next new control is ICT readiness. So this is something that you certainly could have already had in place. In the 2013 version, there was controls regarding business continuity and disaster recovery. This control specifically talks about conducting a business impact analysis, you know, identifying critical services or activities, and setting recovery time objectives. You know, and then the plans to achieve those, are they being tested on a regular basis? And are there procedures, you know, for actually enacting those business continuity plans, and as well as restoring the original services once they become available again? Physical security monitoring is another new control. And I want to be careful with this because it is looking to see that physical premises are being monitored in some fashion. It does not specify that any particular type of monitoring has to be in place. You know, so it could be video monitoring, but I know in certain parts of the world that's not allowed. So it doesn't have to be that. It could be motion detectors, you know, alarm systems, contact detectors. It could be guards, or having front desk personnel having a manned desk at the entrance to the location, you know, that is responsible for verifying individuals who are coming in, that they are who they say they are, and that they're supposed to be there, that kind of thing. So there's a number of different ways to demonstrate this, but it is a new control in 2022. The next control is configuration management. So I think this is, there's not a real good analogy for this from the 2013 version. So I think this is a pretty fresh control. It talks about having configurations, including security, of hardware, software, services, and network established, documented, implemented, monitored, and reviewed. So it's looking to see that there's some type of kind of overarching configuration management, so that, you know, in a given organization, you know, if for whatever reason they use 20 different types of laptops from 20 different vendors, you know, are they at least also configured the same? If they're not, then you need to maintain some type of record or documentation about what the baseline configuration is, so that when you're looking at these machines through internal audit or maybe some other part of your regular monitoring activities, you have an idea of if they've been modified or not. Some other examples we talk about here: is there a procedure in place for changing configurations? Is there a standard template or image used? Are changes managed following the change management process? And how are these configurations being monitored and updated when necessary? Obviously, there are tools out there, more and more, you know, that allow for configuration management remotely, but you don't have to have a tool. There's other ways to achieve it. You just need to be able to demonstrate that these activities are being done. Another new control, information deletion. So this control is really wanting to see that there's been some specifics determined about when information should be deleted, including if devices or storage media needs to be disposed of. So things that can demonstrate this is there a data retention policy? So have you determined for different data types, or maybe you just have a blanket retention policy for all data type, depending on what you do, but has that been defined? So we and you at least know, if data is older than this many years, months, days, whatever the case may be, it should be deleted. Then have you talked about or determined how they should be deleted? If a third party is doing disposal for you or shredding, printed documents, is there an agreement? Oh, I'm sorry. No, so this would be like if you're using maybe a cloud service provider or some other provider who is storing information on your behalf. Has it been addressed in the agreement that data that has gone past that retention period will be deleted, or that data will be deleted upon termination of the service? And then going back to using a disposal service provider, have they been vetted for their information security capabilities so that you know that they're doing things in a way that meets your requirements? Are you getting certificates of destruction, things of that nature? Data masking. So this is mostly going to be in regards to certain types of data, such as PII. So around companies that have that data, are you using encryption where it's necessary? And is that data being anonymized as required? And is there a procedure to do that? Another control that's new for 2022 is data leakage prevention. Again, I want to be careful with this because I know there's a lot of tools, DLP tools out there, and in many cases can be quite expensive. This control does not require that a tool is in place, but what we're looking to see is first and foremost, has there been identification of the type of information that needs to be protected against leakage? Is there any type of monitoring in place for those pathways where the data could be leaked, such as emails, file transfers, mobile devices, personal devices, portable storage, etc. And then if you do have a tool, how is that tool being used? What is it monitoring? If it does detect, that certain conditions have been met that could indicate the presence of a leak, is that being communicated to the correct people? And are those people taking the necessary actions? Again, it does not require the use of a tool or solution. However, if you are an organization that handles a lot of this type of information and there's a lot of risk around, potentially having that information leaked, it could be practical. All right, another new control is monitoring activities. Again, I think this kind of aligns with some of the previous controls around logging, but it doesn't have to be just logs that are being monitored. There's a lot of different ways that you can monitor all sorts of different activity. So again, no expensive or particular tool or solution is needed, but we're just looking to see if there's some type of monitoring in place. And then how does that monitoring work? Is it just monitoring and it sits quiet, or what are the conditions in which people are notified? What's being monitored? And is the monitoring ultimately, is it leading to actions being taken? Whether that be just doing an investigation because something looks suspicious to confirm, there was no actual incident or concern there, or if there was one, is that being acted upon as well? Again, this doesn't require the usage of a SIM or SIEM. So I always say it wrong depending on who I talk to, but there are a lot of great tools out there as well that can assist with this. So that's what this control's after. Web filtering. So we're just looking to see that there's something in place that is doing some type of filtering in terms of allowing, you know, folks doing work under the organization's control to stop them from going to known malicious sites. You know, this can be browser-based, could be antivirus, could be firewall configurations, could be a dedicated, you know, web filter. There's a lot of different ways to do this. Also, this could be part of acceptable use, right? Is it clearly communicated to the organization and its staff what's allowed and what's not allowed in terms of the types of websites you should be visiting on company equipment? And then are people being trained on that? So, you know, I think having a technical tool in place that's going to actually prevent people, it's just going to block it, let them know, hey, you're not allowed to go here, or just give them a 404 or whatever the case may be. They can't get there if they wanted to, or if it was an accident. In lieu of that, if it requires, you know, your end users to have some responsibility in terms of knowing where they should and shouldn't go. Have they been trained on it, and are they aware of it? The next code, the next control is in regards to software development, largely secure coding. So what we'd be looking for as auditors is to see if there's processes that have been documented or established. Basically speak to secure coding principles. Does it cover software components from third parties and open source? You know, a lot of organizations use open source components. So are those being vetted out and risk assessed as needed? And then the coding principles, secure coding principles that have been established, are they being used in all aspects of the software development lifecycle? And then something else that could help demonstrate this is there evidence of security testing of some type being done during and after the development? Oh, and that's all of the new controls. So at this point, I will be happy to answer any questions you may have. I am opening up my questions tab now, so please feel free to send any questions you have, either about the content that we just talked about the transition or any of the new controls or requirements, or just 7001 in general. I'd be happy to answer any and all questions. Outside of that, again, please feel free to reach out to PJR. I put our toll-free number on the screen here on this last slide, or if you have something that you would rather just email me about, my email address is located there as well. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have via email as well. Otherwise, I just want to thank everybody for joining today, and I hope this helped with any questions you might have had around the transition. We have a question from Travis. Can we get a copy of the slide deck? Yes, Travis, shortly after this webinar is completed, if you go to our website, pjr.com, there is a link to training and then past webinars where you'll be able to download the slide deck. So please feel free to do that. Oh, and it looks like Kristen here has posted the link right in the answers box. So that'll be where you'll be able to get the slide deck. All right. Well, if that's it for the questions, again, thank you all for joining, and I hope you all have a great day. And please feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions about 27001 certification. Thank you.